Appreciate everybody being here. Talk about post-quantum cryptography. I'd like to start by, I was just having a discussion with a friend about Y2K. How many of you guys remember Y2K? I remember where I was December 31st, 1999. I was at a friend's house and everybody was panicked, what's going to happen? And I remember I had a really bad friend who, right as the clock struck midnight, like flipped the switch, the breaker at the house, and it like went dark and everyone was like, ah, stuff's happening, it's so bad. Y2K, fortunately, not much happened. The world prepared. And Y2K was so interesting because it wasn't just technical people that were worried about it. Like, I wasn't even in technology at the time, and like it had my attention, and I was like, holy cow. Quantum computers is a version of Y2K. But the hard thing about it is there's no date. We don't have a date, so we don't know when quantum computers are going to be here. But there's a massive undertaking that has to happen in the coming years that, in my opinion, the world is wildly unprepared for. And so my presentation today is to talk about the migration that's going to need to happen and why things need to start happening today. Now, many people will say, oh gosh, you're so, like quantum computers are 7 to 10 years away. I agree with that. But the planning and the orchestration of what needs to happen needs to start happening today. So this is a quick overview. I have like 20 minutes and I'm going to move fast, cover some stuff, and then we have a booth right over here. I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about the quantum landscape, how quantum's going to impact security. We're going to talk about the timelines for migration that are out there, and then we'll quickly talk about the algorithms and then what organizations can do to start preparing. My background, I'm Vice President of Digital Trust at DigiCert. I've been at the company for 10 years. DigiCert is a leader in cryptography. So this is the space that we play in. And we feel one of our missions is to help the world prepare for quantum cryptography. I've spent most of my career in healthcare. I started at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services doing policy work, worked for GE Healthcare for many years, building medical devices and software running on them. And I saw firsthand at GE how unprepared the industry was from a cyber standpoint. Cryptography is an important part, so I came to DigiCert about 10 years ago and have been doing a lot in healthcare since. So quantum computers are supercomputers. They are much more powerful than anything that we have today, and they're going to do a lot in terms of healthcare. I believe they'll accelerate our ability to cure disease, better manage disease, and to solve problems today that we can't with today's computers. The challenge with quantum, though, is that they're also really good at doing math. And today's security is based on math. Cryptography today is based on RSA and ECC curves that use math. Quantum computers will be able to crack today's algorithms in a matter of seconds. This is a diagram of what they call the Alice and Bob communication paradigm. If you're not familiar with this, let me just give you a quick overview. There's an exchange of public and private keys. In asymmetric cryptography, a public key is made available and the private key is protected. And when one sender, they send the file, it's decrypted with the private key. And that's a way with email. There's so many use cases today that use this approach for secure communication. And it's exchange of public and private keys. They call it asymmetric cryptography. All asymmetric cryptography will be able to be cracked by quantum computers. Today's computers, it would take, I think I have a slide here, classic computers would take 1 trillion years, some estimate, to crack today's RSA and ECC algorithms. A quantum computer will be able to do the math to crack those algorithms in a matter of seconds. And so that puts all of the technology that cryptography is used on today at risk when quantum computers become available. So that's just kind of level setting to say, is it really a problem and why does quantum computers pose a risk? Well, it's because they're really good at at doing math, much better than the supercomputer, much better than the classic computers that are available today. So talking about asymmetric cryptography, we provision at DigiCert certificates is kind of our bread and butter. And certificates are used everywhere. If you look at, think about your work day. When you turn your laptop on and it authenticates to your Wi-Fi, there's a certificate that is doing that to authenticate that connection. When you use a VPN to connect in, a certificate is being used to do that. When a medical device is authenticating to a gateway and then the gateway is authenticating to the cloud, certificates are used to establish those authenticated connections and to facilitate encrypted communication. Asymmetric cryptography is deeply embedded in all of the technology that we use today. And so when we think about the migration that needs to happen and replacing all asymmetric cryptography, it is a massive undertaking because it's everywhere. And the problem is, one more thing I'll say on this is backwards compatibility is going to be the big challenge for organizations. Because when you migrate, if you migrate your system to a crypto post-quantum algorithm, and an IT system that you're connecting to does not, that communication is going to break and you're going to have a backward compatibility issue. And so the amount of planning and coordination that needs to go into this migration is massive. I was speaking with a CISO at a large healthcare insurance company last week, and he told me that the migration from SHA-1 to SHA-2, which is the last crypto upgrade that happened, took their organization between 7 and 8 years to fully migrate. So if I now look at the timeline, we're in 2025. If they started the migration to PQC and it took them that amount of time, they'd be done in 2032. The migration to post-quantum, though, is going to be harder than the migration from SHA-1 to SHA-2. And that's why, as DigiCert, I feel it's our responsibility to be saying we need to wake up and start realizing that the migration needs to happen starting today. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have quantum algorithms on your medical devices or on your IT service, anything in your IT infrastructure next year. But that means that you need to begin the planning to orchestrate the level of effort that's going to take to be ready for it. There's some really interesting developments recently. We're now starting to see chips that are being able to support, most recently, Microsoft and the Majorana chip, which is the first chip that supports topological computing. The really cool thing about Microsoft and the chip that they have is it's really cool. It actually has sound prevention. So one of the disruptions to quantum, they're very fragile, can be sound. And it supports hundreds, thousands of qubits, but it also has resistance to sound, which can be disruptive to the stability of a chip. And so while a lot of these things in the past have been theoretical and we're like, yeah, we're going to get these types of things, they're becoming real, which is really, I just want to emphasize how compelling that is, because these things are becoming real. Quantum computers are becoming more of a reality today. Keep going. So let's talk about the transition, and this is the question everybody is asking. When is our Q day? When do we need to be ready? And there really is no perfect answer, but what I can provide you is what the U.S. government, so CNSA is the organization at the U.S. government that's responsible for the migration of all government agencies. And so they have rolled out a timeline, it's here, that has begun. It started in 2022. We're in 2025 today. They have some organizations, the software, firmware, and then networking equipment need to be done by 2030. And you see web browsers, operating systems, and other equipment by 2033. This is the timeline that the US government has rolled out. But the work is already underway, and I can tell you that US government agencies today are testing and are beginning to implement post-quantum cryptography. The other organization that has published a timeline on it is Gartner. So Gartner last year came out and said that by 2029, quantum computers will render today's cryptography useless. And so they're encouraging all critical infrastructure to be fully migrated by 2029. That's Gartner. Yeah, I don't need to, I think we're okay on that. The point that we're making today is that the migration is going to take serious planning, serious coordination, and we need to start this process now. And I'll get into some of the things that you can be doing. Just a quick overview. I think algorithms at this point are a little bit boring, but I'll just talk about NIST last year, I think it was in April, approved the 4 quantum algorithms. They are now available. DigiCert has them available in our platform for testing, for use. We have some customers that are already migrating. But there are a handful of different algorithms that are available, and they're there for different use cases. The Kyber algorithm is all for key encapsulation. It's for protecting the keys, the private keys, and making sure that they're resistant to quantum attacks. Dilithium is the algorithm we believe that will be most commonly used. Sphinx is an algorithm that is intended for higher security use cases. So you think Department of Defense, critical infrastructure, making sure that there's stronger protection around it. And then Falcon is the lightweight. It's more intended for lightweight IoT devices. It has a lower, smaller footprint. Now, the interesting thing about Falcon is that it actually, in the testing with NIST, dilithium they were able to speed up that quite significantly. And so we feel that Falcon may be reduced in its use, but it will still be available and is widely available through certificate authorities today. But that's an overview of the standards. They're out there today. They're available for testing, for implementation, and a lot of work was done over about 7 years to develop those algorithms. So now talking about the state of where we are today, who's doing what? So a handful of organizations have started migrating. Apple, I got an update on my Apple Watch, I think it was early last year, that talked about an update. I read it and it talked about quantum resistant cryptography was introduced. Apple on all of their own technology is actually using it, and they can do that because they control all those connections. Zoom has migrated. Zoom is another example where they were able to do it all at the same time, upgrade their infrastructure. They're using quantum in their technology today, and others are following. So now let's talk about what can you do. I hope I've convinced you that the time to start planning and preparing is now. If you haven't already started, I would say you're behind. Before I came here, I was meeting with the CISO of a medical device manufacturer. He's already communicated with his C-suite about it. He's already prioritized. They're starting with product and then going to enterprise. He has someone assigned who's working on it. Work is starting to happen in the industry, and so organizations need to start planning and having tactical approaches. One thing I say to people all the time when they ask me, okay, well, how do you figure out where to start? And I like to say, find one thing. I love that the CISO I was just meeting with had said, look, one simple decision for us was, do we start with enterprise or do we start with product? And we're going to go with product first, and we're going to start doing that with our product. Find one thing. What system is most critical in your enterprise, in your business? If something were compromised by a quantum computer, do you have the ability to assess where you should start? Ask that question. There's a really good, I'm going to skip to this, a plan of action that I think is the right game plan for anybody who is planning a migration to post-quantum. And the first one, which is often overlooked, is the educational component of it. There are a lot of stakeholders within a business that are going to need to support this migration. It's going to take time, it's going to take money, it's going to take resources. So who in your business do you need to communicate with and help them understand that there is a coming project that is going to take some resource, and get their buy-in and get their support? The next one is an assessment, and that starts with a risk assessment. So which of our systems are using cryptography today? Do you have a central inventory of all the certificates in your portfolio? Do you have the ability to upgrade those certificates? Do you have the right tools that allow you to do that? Assessing where you are in a maturity of managing cryptography, discovering cryptography, and then also understanding the risk of the systems that are using that cryptography. Once you've done that, that helps you understand your starting points and where you can begin. So that assessment takes time and energy as well. Once you do that, you can then effectively plan to say, look, we're going to start with these systems. And we're going to work with whatever partners, we're going to upgrade whatever hardware, we're going to do all of the things that we need, and we're going to build a plan for migration. And we're going to roll that migration plan out until you've planned it for all of your systems. And then we're going to deploy. And once you deploy, you of course need to be able to monitor and say, all right, we've upgraded, are things breaking? What did we miss? What did we overlook? And having the ability to be able to mitigate and ensure that your deployment and your have been successful. But that really at a high level is the steps that organizations have. And I would tell you, there are not a lot of organizations at 4 and 5 today. Most organizations have not even begun the education. We talk with a lot of them that are, because that's our bread and butter. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of organizations, CISOs that I'm speaking with, that are just barely beginning to wake up to this and realizing that there is a massive project ahead for them and a need to become ready for this. This gives you a little bit more information just around as you're assessing your technology. I would tell you there's so many, a common thing that I hear when I sit down with customers is, well, we have the ability to automate renewal of our certificates. Aren't we in a good place? And it's like, no, you're not. And I wish I could say to you, if you're using the world's greatest CLM, Certificate Lifecycle Management, you're in a great place. Now, you are in a better place, but there is so much more to that process than just replacing a certificate. When you replace that certificate with a quantum, I promise you things are gonna break. Hardware won't be able to support it, IT systems won't be connected using it. There's a lot more orchestration, collaboration that is needed. And that's why the planning is so, so important. But here's some tips on, as you're assessing your internal applications and technology that you need to migrate, some of the questions that are important for you to ask. I'm at time. Maybe I can, if there are a couple questions, I'd be happy to answer any. Yeah. The cost of like a certificate? Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's varying opinions on that. We do believe that it's going to be heavier, of course. It's going to be heavier, but I don't have an exact number for you on that today. But what I can tell you is that from the testing in NIST, we saw it is a heavier lift. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 I agree with you, and that's why the planning component of it is so important. And there's what I can tell you is it's a heavier lift. It's a heavier footprint. I mean, what was that? Yeah, I'm not gonna put that out there. But what I can tell you is that it's still cryptography, and it's still, the components of it are all the same, but it's heavier. It increases latency. It increases. It's a heavier footprint. I don't have a percentage. I can go ask if you want to follow up. I'd be happy to see if we can get you if there's literature published on that. Yeah, good question. Other questions? Okay. Well, the last thing I will say is, like any cyber approach, you have to act now to get the protections you need later. Cyber attacks, just like quantum computers, we don't know when they're going to come. One day we will wake up and it will be Y2K, and that's the hard thing for us is this migration does not have a Y2K date. It could happen sooner. Technology with AI is accelerating very quickly. it could accelerate the production and development and distribution of quantum computers. And so the importance of starting now to protect the most important assets is so, so critical. Yeah, please. Yeah, data protection is a big concern. So HHS has not published that, so they have not made a stance on that. But what I will tell you is that we do see Harvest Now, Decrypt Later attacks happening at nation-state levels today. Harvest Now, Decrypt Later is an attack where they capture your data. So you look at health data, and you ask the question, will that be relevant in 7 to 10 years? Will it still be? It will be, right? Personal identifiable information doesn't change. You get older, but that information will still be relevant. So we see nation states capturing data, knowing that they can't unlock or crack that cryptography today, but they'll be able to in 7 years. So they harvest the data and they'll exploit it when quantum becomes more widely available. So in systems like that, that's where we see organizations like Apple, they know that that is a risk. And so they're migrating already so that they have the resistance. And so that's part of the risk assessment organizations should be asking. I look at use cases right now like medical devices that go inside a patient or that will be on a hospital floor for 10 to 15 years. Should you be implementing on those? Yes, you should probably be doing that sooner because those devices are going to be longer lived. Unless you have the ability to send a field service engineer and update that technology, which will happen, of course, but you need to be thinking about longer lived devices, longer lived systems. Migration for those need to happen sooner. Appreciate everybody coming today. DigiCert's booth is right over here. I'll be there. Would be happy to answer any other questions and appreciate everybody coming out today. Thanks so much.